Hello everyone, how are we?
All right.
Thanks for coming down. So yes, I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my story, Beatniks, Broads, and Burlesque. Cats and Kittens Chasing the California Dream. The complete version can be found published online at medium.com. What originally brought Monte de Monte to California in June of 1955 cannot be confirmed. His previous known whereabouts was in the ironbound section of Newark, New Jersey, where he hustled money, playing billiards at a pool hall owned by a local hood, Fat Vinny Giancola. By June, de Monte resided in an apartment in San Francisco's North Beach and commuted to his job at the El Rey Burlesque across the bay in Oakland. It's believed he made the connection for the theater job while still in Newark through someone he met at the pool hall. De Monte was one of many young Easterners who had migrated out to the West Coast around that time. And his first friends in the Bay Area were people he knew from his past. One such friend was the poet and novelist Jack Kerouac, who Monte reconnected with at Allen Ginsberg's infamous reading in October at the Sixth Gallery on Fillmore Street. Another was an old friend from Brooklyn, Andreas Fontaine, who had moved to Los Angeles the year before to work in the film industry in Hollywood. Fontaine came up from Los Angeles around that time to visit de Monte. We were fortunate enough to have him share his memories with us about that trip. Monte was still figuring out his local scene the first time I visited him. He'd only moved out there a few weeks before. He lived in a small North Beach flat that he shared with this young black woman. She was just a friend of his, a woman who dated a jazz horn player. That's all I can remember about it. One afternoon, we were smoking reefer and listening to jazz albums in his apartment when he got a call from Jack, whom we had known from New York, and he invited us to this gallery for a reading that same night. The reading was hyper crazy. There was this manic energy in the crowd. It was kind of hip, kind of scary. Afterwards, we ended up at an all-night diner drinking coffee with Kerouac, Ginsberg, and their pal Snyder. I think we saw Kerouac one more time at a party a day or so later. I always dug hanging out with Jack. Monte had just started working at the El Rey in Oakland, so the next night we drove out there in his 48 DeSoto. I stayed out the entire night, caught a few burlesque shows, and by night's end had hooked up with one of the dancers, Anya. She was this gorgeous, red-hot Filipino woman who shared a pad with other dancers close to the theater, so I ended up staying with her in Oakland for a few days. I went to the El Rey several nights during that trip and met a whole lot of people. I can't remember too many of them, but Tempest Storm, she made a big impression on me. She was a force and really was the gasoline in the engine for that theater. I liked it up there a lot, but I had to get back to LA to attend to my usual business. I came up to visit a couple other times later on. It's unclear exactly what de Monte's responsibilities were in the beginning of his employment at the El Rey, but by the following spring of '56, the theater's manager, Lillian Hunt, had promoted him to be their head liaison with the dancers, which basically meant babysitting them when they came to town to work at the El Rey. This included picking up the dancers at the San Francisco airport or Oakland train station, getting them settled in at the motel near to the theater or at Lillian's house in West Oakland, and looking after their various needs during their performance run, usually one full week for the headliners. Most of the dancers were on the West Coast and were at the El Rey's other theaters in cities such as Los Angeles and Seattle. However, a few of the biggest names flew in from the East Coast or Midwest. The El Rey was one of the top burlesque houses in the nation and attracted all the major headlining dancers of the day, such as Tempest Storm, Lily Christine, Dorian Dennis, Lily St. Cyr, and others. These were hard-working divas who lived out of a suitcase and a world of cigar smoke, tassel pasties, and hustles. They traveled the circuit with their old men, boyfriends or girlfriends, old ladies, girlfriends, or occasionally solo. These were tough women who wouldn't put up with nonsense from anyone and knew the ropes of the burlesque business. Many had done jail time after being arrested for public lewdness. It was a rugged life. While they liked to party on occasion, they all seemed a bit world-weary and mostly kept to themselves. During his first year or so in California, de Monte avoided dating any of the dancers. He revealed in a letter to Andreas that he had a tryst or two, but nothing serious. So many of these dancers are smoking hot, but I can't mix work with play. You don't crack where you eat. According to Fontaine, de Monte's usual routine would be to leave Oakland and his theater around 2 a.m. after the night's last performance and return to San Francisco to socialize in North Beach with a young crowd that would soon become known in the media as the Beatniks. These were poets, hipsters, painters, musicians, and hangers-on who lived their lives for more kicks. Their haunts were coffee shops, art galleries, and the numerous jazz clubs of the North Beach. Their vices of choice were cheap red wine, reefer, and casual sex with each other. People drifted in and out. Many were transients between the two coasts, and some came up from LA to make the North Beach scene. Occasionally, they would all head down to Monterey to hold an all-night party on the beach, but mostly it was all in San Francisco, hopping between parties, poetry readings, and the nightclubs to listen to the great Bay Area's jazz musicians. Monte was one of the few who had a steady job and paycheck. It was a different world than his job across the bay, but it appears he had learned to balance the two. One of the headlining dancers who appeared regularly at the LRA was Miss French Riviera Dorian Dennis. Dennis was one of the top dancers on the international circuit. By that summer, she and de Monte had become romantically involved. They shared a lot in common. Both were originally from Brooklyn, and both had migrated from the East Coast to California. While Dennis kept an apartment in New York, she was primarily based out of Santa Monica with an apartment there as well. Dorian was big time and worked burlesque houses up and down the West Coast and in New York, Philadelphia, Miami Beach, Newark, New Orleans, and Cleveland, averaging $1,200 per week earnings. She occasionally toured England and Canada as well. When performing in Oakland, Dorian stayed with Monte at his North Beach flat, in addition to frequently driving up from Santa Monica if she had a week or two off between tours. She was often featured in national magazines like View and Cabaret. Her new affair was written up in a couple of gossipy magazine articles, and Monte was mentioned as her regular man. Dorian was big time, and de Monte seemed to dig all the attention she, and sometimes he, got from her successful burlesque career. However, there were troubles on the horizon.
Thank you, Phil. I didn't get to blow my whistle.
It's a good time to stop.